CEO and founder of CVR World Cup Cycling Esports, Frank Garcia, is joining us right now on the show, talking about bridging the gap between physical sports, your traditional sports, and esports. I find it fascinating. So I'd like to introduce Frank to the show right now. Frank, how are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I told you in the little phone call before the interview, and I'll have to tell you now just so our listeners aren't concerned. If you hear construction in the background, it's not the building falling down. They're actually doing construction the floor below, so it's fun. It's fun times in radio.
Yeah, it's fun times when you're recording. Yep.
Yeah, it makes awesome natural background noise. Frank, I was really excited when you guys emailed us to have you on the show because there's been recent news, I don't know if you saw, where a esports race car driver beat an actual race car driver in physical cars recently, and it kind of made news in the esports world. And I was like, that's kind of fascinating because we're finally bridging, we're seeing where traditional and physical sports are coming into play with esports and how it can benefit people, right? It's not just sitting on a couch. And then you guys emailed us saying, hey, we'd love to come on the show and kind of talk about what you're doing at CVR World Cup. And I find it fascinating. So for our listeners who don't know, I'll introduce it and then I'll let you kind of explain how it all started. But in short, it is cycling in esports. You're using a real bike. You're using actual motor functions to operate this bike that translates into a game. So how did this all start for you? I mean, obviously you have a background in cycling to want to do this, but how did it go from actually riding down the street to I want to turn this into an esport?
Well, actually, it's funny that you mentioned the virtual motor racing because I've always been a little bit of a gamer at heart, or maybe more than a little bit of a gamer at heart. And I've actually used iRacing.com extensively over the last few years. And it does actually improve your driving quite dramatically. Great simulations in that area. And that coupled with my cycling background, I've always loved to cycle. I really started in earnest when I was in high school. And I was in the wrong district for the school that I went to, and I had to ride my bike every day. And from there, I raced and whatnot. And then as I was older and I had kids, my son was into Dota. And he came to me and he was like, I want to spend $10 on Dota, and it was his money, but he didn't have a credit card at the time because he was young. And he explained to me that he wanted to send it so that people could, get a prize purse. Mm-hmm. And I, of course, wanted to sit down with him and have a discussion about economics. Like, why would you want to send $10 to somebody else?
Probably a fair conversation.
Yeah. I was like, this doesn't sound like the brightest economic decision I've ever heard of. And but he really wanted to do it, so I said okay. And then what I got to see was this vast amount of enjoyment over an extended period of time, and it's probably one of the best $10 investments in terms of entertainment that I've ever seen. And that really opened my eyes to the potential for esports, and obviously gaming, as part of that, and then combining that with cycling, and so. We started to do that, and as we were very early on, sort of in this new physical esports industry, we decided to create CVR World Cup, and we've had races we started in Las Vegas, was a kickoff a couple of years ago, and we've had races in London and Paris and Vancouver and Los Angeles, so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I went back and watched some of the replays from your older events. If what I'm watching, the game, the setup, and everything is that all made by you guys, or is the game separate and then you decided to integrate kind of the bike and everything to it?
There was another organization that started sort of, connecting bike trainers to, virtual worlds, and they have sort of a simulation bent, and we use their platform for a long time. And then just based on comments from people who were watching, so bike racing in its natural state, isn't necessarily the most exciting thing. I mean, if you've a lot of people have watched the Tour de France, but you probably watch the end. You
I was
don't
gonna
watch
say
the
you
6 hours.
tune in for the last lap, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so what we noticed as we were on, Mixer and Twitch and that sort of thing, is we get a lot of comments about the gameplay because, there's nothing exploding and what people are used to in those sorts of environments. And so we created our own game that gives us the ability to run the Spectrum, that's CV Arcade, which you can download at cvrarcade.com. But what we did there was run the whole gambit from more simulation-based with wind and crashing and cornering and that sort of stuff, all the way up to, power-ups and plays that you would expect in a more typical esports arena as well. So we appeal to a wide spectrum of spectators and players.
So obviously like you mentioned before, you actually cycle, you competed in cycling and for real life, right? Like actual on the road cycling. How does that compare then to using like one of the training bikes, or how you guys use it for CVR? Is it kind of like a 1-for-1 comparison, would you say? Like if they're going uphill, how do they feel that incline?
Yeah, there's it's a little bit different. So if I use that motor car sports analogy, those simulations end up being very, very similar. I mean, obviously, if you crash, you don't get injured, but the crashing and the bumping of the cars and all of that is very, very similar. Mm-hmm. In the cycling arena, and this is one of the reasons we created our own game. Really, you do feel it in your legs going uphill, but there's no crashing, and people are transparent, and you can go through them, and so that really changes. It's not very good 1-for-1. So, for instance, I was a sprinter in real life, and so a couple of things there is you crash a lot,
right?
And I have many scars and broken bones and visits to the trauma centers to back that up. And but a lot of what causes that is you have to fight for position, right? Mm-hmm. And so and then you go for it, and literally as a sprinter, you usually sort of like the old race car analogy too. If you see the accident, you kind of sort of steer towards it, and so you just go as hard as you can and hope a space opens up. So that was different as well. But we've added that into the game. So, while you're not going to get injured crashing, in CV Arcade, you crash people, you can't just go through them on a sprint. So it's not all about power. It's a lot about skill as well. So, and I think that will continue to get, closer and closer to, more skill-based, whereas previously it's been a little bit more about how much power you can output and how much you can suffer. Cycling can be a bit about suffering. And so we look to make that more fun in the go-forward period. Now, that being said, the games are just awesome, right? I mean, you get in, you go uphill, you go downhill, you feel it in your legs.
Well, you watch the replays, and, I mean, they're not – the men and women competing, they're not faking it. Like, they are sweating.
No,
quite a bit, some of them.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing to watch. I think one of the things that we found that was very, very compelling and really made us excited about physical esports was while these people are moving and they're suffering and they're just putting out immense amounts of effort, and the sweat's dripping off, as you pointed out, and the hair's flying in all different directions and all of that. That's compelling, right? That's that human connection. Mm-hmm. You really get connected watching this person, and you feel for them, and you start pulling for them. And then, you add on top of that, skills and something that's fun to watch virtually as well, so sort of the game component. And those two things are going to be very, very big. And, people can do it from, the comfort of their homes as well. Don't have to go to the gym. You can do it there as well.
And how does that setup work? I mean, is it just any old bike that you can just set up with however, if you haven't noticed, I'm not a cyclist, so my terms are very basic.
Yeah, so let me this is great. So yes, you can have basically any old bike, and you can hook up a trainer. You can even have a stationary bike and get started that way, and just experience moving through virtual worlds, and then, maybe you upgrade equipment, just like anything else in life, right? As you get,
Yeah,
you
you
get more
start
involved.
low and get a little bit nicer stuff as you get a little bit more serious.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can start pretty inexpensively if you have a bike and a computer. It's like $150 for a trainer and that will work, and you've got some ant stuff and whatnot, and you're probably all in for $200-300.
That seems like such a low bar to get into when I'm watching the replays, right? It's just insane on how, because I have some friends, and they do triathlons, and they're big cyclists, right? It's kind of, and I'm sure you're aware, it's like their culture, right? It's what they do. And to have this in the comfort of your own home, if it's raining outside, or if it's just a different experience, right? It's like you said, you can do it without the risk of, man, I might fall off my bike and seriously injure myself. So with that being said, have you had any backlash from the cycling community, or from anyone that's just like, well, this isn't real cycling?
Oh, absolutely. So we were in velodromes in Paris and Los Angeles, and we get these funny comments, in social media about, well, if you're at a velodrome, why aren't you riding the bike on the velodrome?
Is that the track that you see? Like,
yeah,
in the
that's
middle?
the
Okay,
track. Yeah,
I was gonna say that's what I saw in the
so
replays.
it's like a racetrack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're in the middle of that, right? So there's people riding real bikes, sort of around us at the same time, which I think actually gives a really great atmosphere. But sure, certainly you get the traditionalists, the people who, want to sort of keep things as they are, shall we say. And I think they're different disciplines, and they will be seen as different disciplines. A lot of articles have pointed out that we're already paying out more than your typical bike race. So that's sort of the power of esports. And so I think it will be its own thing. I think it will be very, very large. I think in general, it'll be larger than standard bike racing. I mean, you're still going to have the Tour de France being a huge event, and Paris-Roubaix and and all of these sorts of things. Those things
you don't
aren't
have
gonna
to
go
shut down a
away.
city though for this. You don't have to shut
No,
down
you
roads.
don't.
It's just setting up and go.
Yeah, and I think the streaming audiences and whatnot are just going to be huge, and so that's going to. I think the standard part of the esports realm will be actually bigger than the standard part of bike racing is today. To give you sort of a sense, we pay like almost as much for a stage win as the Tour de France does.
Really?
Yes. So, it's a little bit different, to be fair. The teams get paid as well, right? When you're riding on a professional team. But that just gives you sort of the sense of the power of esports and the power of the numbers of people who watch it.
Do you know off the top of your head, has there been anyone competing in CVR World Cup that doesn't cycle outside of it? Like, did they just pick, like, they might work out on a bike and everything, but as far as like competitively cycling, have this been their introduction?
Yes. So you have people who call themselves indoor specialists now. And so they don't really ride outdoors. And I actually transitioned to riding completely indoors. I've crashed enough, and it's not even if you're riding recreationally, it's not if, it's when.
Right.
Something is gonna go amiss, and you're gonna hit the tarmac. And usually that's just uncomfortable road rash and sort of bleeding in your sheets. How's that for a graphic you probably don't want on the radio? But and you recover from that, fairly quickly. But as I got older, broken bones, it takes longer to recover and that sort of thing. And then there's a lot of distracted drivers these days. And so I myself became an indoor specialist, other than maybe like on vacation. Like if I'm someplace, I'll go ride outdoors because it's pretty and safe and that sort of thing. But you have a lot of people who are indoor specialists now who ride almost exclusively indoors.
And so what is next for you guys? I believe in the introduction email that you guys sent, you have an international event coming up.
We do. So we have the major every sort of April, May time period, and you guys can keep out for the exact dates, probably early May. this year, maybe a little bit later. But big prize purses, so over $100,000 in cash prizes. And we'll look to have both now a physical version, and there will also be a non-physical version. And the purpose of the non-physical version is twofold. One, you can play it as a game, but more importantly, it allows you to sort of download and try the game and sort of understand what you're getting into physically before you sort of, go out and purchase lots of hardware. So just to ease the entry of people into the physical experience. And then we have this process called physical equalization where, you can ride with your friends who are maybe stronger or less strong or more fit or less fit. And you guys can all ride together and enjoy the process because we process the digital signals and sort of make it effort-based versus strength-based. So there's it's a really fun experience. And audio and video, the platform is built for esports, so you can share in conference either audio or video if you'd like.
Right. And so I mean, people can sign up. The website cvrworldcup.com. Twitter is at CVR World Cup, and then as you mentioned earlier, CVRcade, which is kind of your guys' standalone game for it, right? I guess is that proper to say?
That is correct, yes. And so that has, 3 themes in it. So you can sort of have the road theme, which is what most people tend to think about when they think about bike racing. And then you've got the mountain bike theme, which have gotten a lot of traction on. Sort of did that just because we could. Mm-hmm. And that's been really, really popular. Just gives you sort of a different experience. And, you're riding on trails and in mountains, obviously, mountain bike type stuff, and you can have single track and that sort of thing. And then we have the fantasy part, which is more, geared towards the gaming side and power-ups and tractor beams.
I did see that. That did look interesting to me. Something about hitting a tractor beam on someone actually trying to physically ride a bike seemed entertaining enough. Yes,
we have these little, bumps and smurfs, kind of things. And the one you can give somebody else a flat tire, which is like a love-hate relationship in the game. Like there's always controversy over whether there should be such a power-up. And it just ends up being lots of fun in that realm. And, it's just a different way to play and sort of get lost in what you're doing. And then before you know it, you've spent an hour exercising and, getting fit and, just having fun the whole time and not even thinking about, that aspect of it.
Yeah. And like I said at the start, that's one thing that I love about it, right? Is because when you hear from people who aren't into esports or, they only do traditional sports, right? They're traditionalists, all you're doing is sitting on a couch or you're sitting at your computer or doing anything like that. And like this kind of proves like it doesn't have to be exclusive. We don't have to draw the line. There can be a good amount of both in each scene,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. And it's funny. You talked about pushback earlier. So the cyclists, the whole fantasy part just like hurts the mind. Right. Mm-hmm. And even the guys who are, sort of on the esports platforms, that's like, it's kind of shocking to them, to begin with. And then they find it to be, fun, over time. And it's just a different way to ride, right? It's a different, sort of experience. And you can have a little bit more fun in that one with these, power-ups and whatnot. But it just takes a little bit of time. But I think these are definitely converging. Without a doubt, more and more people are going to do this. Gaming is absolutely huge. Sports is absolutely huge. And I think those two are going to blend into something very special.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you because, as esports grows, you're going to get people more involved from the traditional side of it, right? And I guess if you are a cyclist and you have your doubts, I really do have to encourage people to go and actually watch the events and realize, these are not just... This isn't me trying to ride a bike. These people I feel like could go and actually compete in a natural cycling race because they sweat. You really see that HD sweat going through.
Yeah, like last year in Los Angeles, which was our major last year, this time of the year, Lionel Sanders was there. Lionel Sanders is, finished second at Kona as a triathlete, so world-class athlete, and won the long course triathlon a year or two ago. So you have world-class athletes, and you see them competing against other world-class athletes as well, but also what I would call sort of your person who you found who you wouldn't have found them before because they're in their basement, and maybe they had this ingrained talent, but no one would ever identify it because they're a dad and they've got a job, and they didn't dedicate their life like Lionel Sanders did to sport. But they're really genetically strong, and they've put in the time and the effort, and they've learned the skills of the game. And now you have this great, I call it esports for everybody, right? You have this ability for sort of anybody to join up and to gain skills, and we're really heightening that with CV Arcade. Like I think we paid last year the top women's purse in bicycle racing, and if not the top, very, very close. And so you have, men and women competing, and that's another aspect of the esports platforms that I think is just going to explode. Just sort of this equality, and you saw the races. The women are just as compelling as the men, if not more so, right? I mean, it's very, very intense, and you get to see the suffering and the power and the desire from anybody who's doing it, sort of up close and personal. And so we just think there's a tremendous potential.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to see the future event. Like you said, the major later on this year. So we'll keep an eye out for the date. Again, for our listeners, the website is cvrworldcup.com. You can check it out there. And then for the game, it's CVR Cade. I like that name,
yep.
By the way. CV Arcade.
Well, thank you.
Very clever.
Yes, thank you. And like I said, it's about fun and getting fit, and we have a great time.
Excellent. Well, Frank, I don't want to take up too much of your time, though. I do thank you again for coming on the show. Like I said, I think this is fascinating. I think the possibilities are endless, especially as esports grows bigger and everyone wants to be healthy, and this is a easy way to sneak that in while playing video games.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem, sir. Thank you again.